Riina was only 5 foot tall. He looked like a balloon, an inflated balloon.
He had terrible eyes that you wouldn't see on the most ferocious animal.
He used to turn red when he got mad. That's when you knew he was dangerous.
Just by looking at him, you knew he embodied power.
You could feel his mafioso charisma.
It was a massacre, a true extermination of top institutional figures.
I'll kill you like a dog, he'd say.
Capo dei Capi isn't just a figure of speech.
Io sono Salvatore Riina da Corleone.
Mafia Confidential.
Salvatore and Riina played a leading role in a mafia war that lasted from 1981 to 1983. In Sicily, more than 1,000 deaths have been attributed to it.
He was a dear friend, but at a certain point he changed his mentality and changed mine as well.
His childhood had been scarred by a dramatic event. He just turned 13 when, as he tried to defuse a bomb, an American World War II bomb, it exploded. His father and his 7-year-old brother died. He and his other brother, Gaetano, survived. As soon as he turned 18, he was named an official member of the Cosa Nostra by Luciano Liscio. What set him apart immediately was his unprecedented ferocity. At 19, during a fist fight, he killed a colleague. At a young age, he was about to find out what being in prison was like, because he was sentenced to 12 years in jail.
Taciturno, occhi da furbo, faccia da contadino. Attaccatissimo ai soldi, capace di tutto pur di intascare una tangente, ma disposto anche a tutto pur di liberarsi di un avversario.
He decapitated literally every single Palermo institution. Riina had to have complete control over the institutions, culture, civil society, and so on. This was his strategy of death. And finally, the massacres.
Uno dei criminali più pericolosi e ricercati del mondo, il boss dei boss, capo di una filiera capace di estendere i suoi tentacoli dalla Sicilia al resto del mondo, la primula rossa imprendibile, intelligentissima, diabolica, capo della potentissima cosca dei Corleonesi, e al vertice della cosiddetta cupola, quell'organismo che controlla e gestisce tutti i traffici di Cosa Nostra.
The Cosa Nostra's democracy was just a facade. In reality, the leader of the mafia organization was Toto Riina. At one point in history, he decided to declare war on the state. That was an innovative factor.
He used to say, you have to make war to then make peace. He thought a war on the state with the use of bombs could be a positive thing, not only for the Cosa Nostra, but also for all the mafia organizations in Italy.
Di lui per lunghi anni gli inquirenti sono stati in possesso soltanto di una vecchia foto, ma il suo volto recentemente era stato invecchiato in uno dei laboratori dell'FBI. Non sappiamo ancora se quello che avete visto sia il suo nuovo volto.
He was the most lovable person in the world. He was kind, not just to me, but to everyone. He wasn't vulgar and wouldn't swear. When he got angry, his face would turn red, and as soon as he turned red, you knew he was getting dangerous. In 1963, a person accused me of being a thief, and I was imprisoned. They took me to a cell where I met Riina. People would risk 3 days of prison just to visit him. Being in the same cell 24/7, I started feeling very close to him. We played a lot of checkers, and I beat everyone except Riina. Riina, instead, lost against everyone but me. There were these kinds of jokes. One day, while taking a walk, I heard people yelling. A brute, Shiriddu, was screaming at Riina. Riina's face was very red. I let 2 minutes go by, and then I called to him. Listen up, Shiriddu. Come here. I have something to say to you. I took him aside, and without him expecting it, I slapped him twice and headbutted him. I hurt him. They took me away and put me in an isolation cell. I stayed there for 12 days. When I came out, Riina's attitude towards me was completely different. He said, "You're my friend, and I'm your friend. I'm a winning card, you'll see." When I got out of prison and heard they were out too, I looked for him. They took me in officially with the famous pungitura. They prick your finger, make 2 drops of blood come out, and give you a prayer card. Then they set it on fire, and you have to make sure it keeps burning. They say, "Repeat after me. In front of this holy image, I swear that my flesh will burn if I ever betray the Cosa Nostra."
Very little was known of Riina. Old news and some old photos. He had been a fugitive for 10 years. Nobody knew he was married or that he had kids, because he had so much support that he could go to the hospital to attend the birth of his child.
One morning, I went to pick him up as usual, and he seemed happy and said, "I have to tell you something. You are the first one to know. A beautiful and intelligent woman has just become my fiancé. I got engaged to Calogero Bagarella's sister, you know, Ninetta." He said, "She sure was looking for a man." A joke to say that even if he was funny-looking, she was looking for an important man. So it wouldn't have mattered what he looked like. He didn't say she had chosen him for love. Maybe love came afterwards. They had 4 children.
Ninetta Bagarella was like part of the family. She knew who her husband was and who his brothers were. She knew everything. Of course she did. She was part of it. Her husband was who he was. What could she have done? He didn't care about other women. He only had Ninetta Bagarella. She was the only one he cared about. He was the only member of the mafia who was faithful till the end. Everyone else had a mistress. He was the only one who didn't.
A wife keeps her husband's secrets. For example, I wouldn't care if my wife saw me with bloody clothes or a suitcase full of weapons. My wife used to see nothing. Mafia women are like this.
The newspaper Il Venerdì della Repubblica assigned me a project about Totò Riina's family. I thought I would go to Corleone. I entered a pastry shop, a famous one, which made special cakes. I thought I would find mafia wives there. That's where I met Ninetta Bagarella, Riina's wife, and her sister. A girl came up to me. She asked me, "Are you an artist?" I said, "Yes, I'm a photographer, an artist." I suddenly got a strange feeling, as if everyone were paying attention to this girl. "A coffee for the artist," she added. "Did you understand who I am?" I had not. She was a pretty girl, sweet. She tells me she is Toto Riina's daughter and that she wants to introduce me to her cousins and her sister. I said, well, since I'm here and you told me who you are, I want to be honest. I want to take some pictures of you. Yes, okay. 10 days later, she calls again and says, my father is very happy. He put all the photos in his room. He is at your service. He thanks you, and if you ever need anything, you can come here. I hung up the phone and never did anything. She told me her dream was to go to New York, in America, to become a painter, but she could not because of her father. A father like that would make it impossible. I put myself in her shoes and imagine being the daughter of a man like that. It's a terrible punishment. What do you inherit from your family? A mother who runs away, a life spent keeping silent. A killer is a father. Where does she belong?
With his sons and his family, he was definitely a loving father. His sons will justify his behavior. For us, we were mafiosi. The mafia was a good thing. It helped the poor and the weak. At the time, the mafia was not that cruel. But Riina changed it. With Riina, the mafia shed its skin. He told me he wasn't interested in money, other ideas.
The families in Palermo that controlled drug trafficking had economic power worth about 20 trillion lira. The Corleone families were definitely envious.
A Palermo, polizia, carabinieri, magistrati sono alle prese con una delle più clamorose e inquietanti vicende di mafia. Che una vera e propria guerra per il predominio sul traffico della droga si sia scatenata a Palermo tra i clan mafiosi non c'è dubbio. È appena trascorso un mese infatti da due criminali imprese, gli omicidi dei boss Bontade e Inserillo.
Strangely enough, Bontate Stefano wouldn't sleep in his house anymore. When he was killed, we found him holding a gun. Something a mafia boss never does. Salvatore Inserillo was killed while stepping out of an armored car. This event led us to think about something that had happened the day before. For the first time in Palermo, a Kalashnikov had been used to shoot up a jewelry store. This was Riina, who had tested it to see if it could shoot through armored glass. The Corleone people were occupying the city. They were driven by hate. They used corrupt people within some of the families to eliminate their bosses.
This had never happened in the history of the mafia. Riina had the power to persuade mafia members to murder their own brothers, daughters, and uncles.
He promised them they would become mafia leaders. In this way, he betrayed other bosses as well as those who had remained loyal to them. There was a massacre in Palermo, a homicide a day, 300 homicides a year. Headlines in the newspapers counted the homicides in red numbers, 101, 102, 103.
Riina invented a ritual in which, after having eaten, he would strangle people. They would tell you there would be some kind of meeting and a dinner afterwards. People had already been chosen and knew what was going to happen. They were followed with a rope and...
The Corleonesi had taken over. They challenged the legal state and attacked those who stood against them. The real bosses were Riina and Provenzano.
They were ferocious, very ferocious, and capable of any kind of aberration. It doesn't feel good to look at my books, my photographs. It hurts me. The smell of blood is a smell that's powerful and unpleasant. It was a holiday, the Epiphany. We arrived just after the killers, while people were carrying the wounded man out. We found out that he was the president of our region, Piersanti Mattarella. He died shortly after the ambulance arrived. There was a man holding him while getting out of the car. This photo was in the newspapers for a long time, but then was forgotten for 20 years. When the new president of the Italian Republic was elected, this photo acquired a new meaning. Our president of the Republic was that young man whose brother was killed there. My fellow photographers and I were thrown into a besieged city.
È stato ucciso il capo dell'ufficio istruzione Rocco Chinnici, uomo di punta della guerra ai mafiosi.
Le immagini che vi stiamo mostrando fanno pensare, più che al classico agguato mafioso, ad una vera e propria azione di guerriglia urbana. Una strage che fa pensare all'azione dei commandos terroristici in Libano, contro le quali poco possono valere le scorte o le auto blindate.
When we arrived at the crime scene, it was absolutely horrific. The newspapers ran the headline, "Palermo like Beirut." It was the first time an explosive was used to kill an institutional representative.
Il culmine della sua ferocia arrivò nel maggio del 92, quando il tritolo fece saltare in aria l'autostrada di Capaci. Riina decise che era arrivato il momento di dare, secondo lui, una scossa al paese.
Mai la mafia era arrivata tanto. 1000 chili di tritolo, una potenza esplosiva impressionante e inimmaginabile, dicono gli inquirenti, per cancellare il nemico giurato, l'uomo diventato in questi anni il simbolo stesso della lotta alle cosche mafiose.
Men of the DIA wiretapped a very interesting conversation about the attentatuni, the biggest attack. The greatest enemy, Giovanni Falcone, had died. Falcone had demonstrated that the mafia was not invincible. He had gathered enough evidence to take them to court and have them sentenced. An attack against the heart of the state, told for the very first time by one of its executioners.
I was born in Altofonte, a little village near Corleone, in a mafia family. My father was a mafioso, I was a mafioso, my grandparents, my uncles, as well as my great-grandfather. Let's say it was a mafia family since the 18th century. My family's district was San Giuseppe Giatto, and we've always been very close to Corleonesi. Our side stood with Riina. Nobody ever died, only people on the other side died. There were quite a lot of us. First we went to take a look at the place, how it could be done. The more we were, the better we could study the place. By the way, it was always just us who were closest to Riina. He said, this is the right spot, so we took that place at Capaci. There was a tunnel, and Riina said, let's blow up the tunnel. Wow, what the hell. First you have to test it out. I did it with a car. A white Lancia Integrale. The test had to be done at 150 or 160 to follow the pace of the car that carried the people.
Santino Di Matteo says that he slid the explosive into a tunnel under the highway from Palermo's airport using a skateboard.
They put the gunpowder in a tunnel, a drainage pipe used to let the water flow from one side to the other. I think it was 200 or 300 kilos of gunpowder. They put in 5 kilos at a time until it was ready. It was well done.
I've never liked referring to myself as Montinaro's widow. But I'm Tina Montinaro, Antonio's wife. Antonio was 24 years old and had made great choices in his life, starting a family and escorting Giovanni Falcone. He used to say, "I have put my life at risk for him." The night before, Antonio called his colleague and changed shifts with him. It was one of the last times he could escort Dr. Falcone, since he was going to be transferred to Rome. Antonio wanted to pick him up himself. We were in the kitchen, and he put Gaetano, who was 4.5 years old, on his legs and said, "Dad is leaving. He is leaving with Dr. Falcone."
They had already been informed that when the cars came out, they had to go get Falcone. Somebody leaked the information.
He was so aware of what could happen that he used to say, "The day this happens, you will have to come and pick me up with a spoon, because there will be nothing left of me."
La croma marrone con i 3 agenti, Antonio Montinaro, Vito Schifani e Rocco Di Cillo, è la prima della fila e la prima a saltare in aria, schizza in alto e finisce a 200 metri dall'autostrada tra gli alberi verso il mare.
There was little left of my husband. What was left of Antonio, and what I recognized, as he had this bad habit of biting his nails, was my husband's hand. Also because his fingers were crossed. He always crossed his fingers when he was driving on the highway.
They made a toast to Riina, as if it was, as if they had done something good. But to me, it meant very little. What should I toast to?
Dr. Riina and the others, they can't feel love. People are just numbers to them. What love could you feel inside? How do you live this way? When I entered the courthouse, I realized he was right next to me. I didn't want to look at him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. To me, in that moment, he was not there. He and I had nothing to say to each other.
He used to say, "Just do it, whatever it takes. We don't care if it's children or women." Riina brought everyone to ruin, from the beginning to the end.
An unforgettable moment was when Santino Di Matteo told us about the attentatuni. It is of exceptional significance. Not long after this, the Cosa Nostra kidnapped Santino Di Matteo's son. Because Di Matteo had turned his back on them and became an informer.
I was at the DIA, and they told me they had captured my son at the stable. They went there dressed as policemen and took the boy, telling him they would take him to his father. They kidnapped my son to make me shut up, but I didn't shut up. I kept on going like a train because I know how it works. Nobody had to tell me how it works. When they kidnap someone, no one comes back. Children don't come back, women don't come back, you understand?
Uccideteli tutti, uccidete anche i bambini. Parole di Riina, sì, perché l'infamità della mafia arriva anche a questo. Un bambino di 11 anni, ed è notizia di ieri, è stato preso prigioniero, strangolato, buttato nell'acido perché il padre si era pentito.
You can't touch that kid. What do children have to do with this? What do women have to do with this? What kind of a mafia is this?
They killed him to teach his father and any other people who might betray them a lesson.
Come suo padre avessero voluto pentirsi.
That wasn't enough for them, so they dissolved his corpse in acid. So no one could ever lay a flower or say a prayer at his tombstone. But these men of honor? These are beasts.
It's true, he's dead. He died innocent. But you and the rest of you, what have you done? What battle have you won? The battle of destruction. I don't see him as a mafioso, I see him as a terrorist.
It was shortly after the massacres that we lived in constant worry, if not to say in fear. Everyone tried to contribute in some way, to do what we could. Something to be able to hold our heads high, to not end up crushed by this ferocious beast.
Riina could do anything he wanted because he knew very important people in every circle. People that had asked him for a favor before. All people he could easily blackmail because if you are corrupt, you can also be blackmailed.
When he realized that his friends were a bunch of traitorous assassins, he was afraid he could be killed. Riina's best friends were all killed because he ordered it.
Hunting down a ghost is very hard. These people move, they roam. No one knows them anymore, and a layer of very loyal people protects them. It was easy to call someone and have him moved.
When I accompanied him, he reminded me never to say anything about where I went or who I knew. He told me, Gasperi, when you leave, I will move. There could be someone who wants to hurt me. He could take you, torture you, you talk and tell them where I am. I'll have moved.
We were an exploratory patrol, a platoon that operated in civilian environments. We used guerrilla tactics applied to urban settings. Few people knew we were in Palermo trying to capture Riina. The few that knew that laughed. They said, "You from Milan, come and throw yourselves into Palermo and go to capture Riina." It was also the symbol of something unreachable, unattainable. To us, Falcone was the symbol of the fight against the mafia. He was killed in May, and in June we were ready. We had done our research and knew who our targets were. 3 people from Palermo, tied to the mafia. The name Sansone appeared in our investigations. They were contractors and had property on the Via Bernini. We started to monitor the Via Bernini, thinking we would find something, but never what we actually found.
The regional commander of the Carabinieri in the Piedmont called me and told me there was an informer, Balduccio di Baggio, who could help us to find Riina, to help us to catch him. I immediately organized Balduccio's secret transfer from Turin to Palermo. The Carabinieri were already on the right track, but Balduccio di Maggio offered them the last piece of the puzzle.
Di Maggio confessed to being Riina's driver. There were only a few sketches of Riina, some computer-made identikits. No one knew who he was. We placed what we technically call a whale, an observer, at Via Bernini 55. to watch who went in and out of the building. DiMaggio saw a few boys on motorcycles on the Via Bernini and says, that is Toto's son. He saw a car going in and out of the building. He said, that is Ninetta Bagarella. When you have a family and you're a fugitive, your wife becomes one too, because she stays by your side. The following day, you spread out, covering the entire area and every escape route. Around 8 o'clock, we saw Citroën. And as soon as it entered the building, DiMaggio said, that is Biondino. We knew Biondino Salvatore was the district chief, a general. About 10 minutes later, Biondino came out with a passenger. DiMaggio recognized Riina. At that point, we started following them and blocked their car with ours. I took Biondino out. Vichingo un ultimo took Riina. It took me 10 minutes to get to the station, but it felt like 5 years.
The Carabinieri took me to a room with Riina. He was standing under a portrait of General Dalla Chiesa. A simple man, a farmer. This is the image he tried to portray. In reality, it wasn't hard to detect a much deeper level to him. I asked Riina if he had something to say, and he simply answered that he wanted to be transferred to prison as quickly as possible.
Biondino, who stood 20 meters away from him, at some point he started to complain and talk loudly. Riina turned around and looked at him, which made Biondino look down, lower his head, and sit down. He didn't speak any more that day. At that moment, you could feel the kind of power this man emanated.
As a boss, Riina never showed signs of bias against the penitentiary system in which he was convicted. He was a mafia boss 24/7. Answering the lawyers, the prosecutor, he often spoke steadily and denied everything. He even denied his knowledge of some criminal phenomenon called the mafia, called the Cosa Nostra.
Non ho frequentato nessuna criminale Cosa Nostra e quindi non conosco.
La domanda è se riconosce l'esistenza, se ne ha sentito parlare.
No, non ho sentito parlare. Io, signor Presidente, sono un lavoratore. Non sono quello che si dice nei giornali, nelle televisioni.
Aspetti un momento.
The first time I had a direct encounter with Riina was in 1995. We were in a reserved wing of the Ucciardone prison. The judge asked Riina if he intended to answer or if he wanted to use his right to remain silent. Riina said, I use my right to remain silent, but I want to say that Cantiemi, the informer, is despicable, a traitor, a liar. He started a long speech against Cantiemi and all the informers. I, as a young prosecutor, intervened and said, look, you chose to use your right to remain silent, so you must be silent. If you intend to talk, then you will answer our questions. He, in fact, remained silent from that moment on, but he never took his eyes off me. It was the look of someone who knew how to show, even with just his body language, his disdain for the institutions and the men who at that time represented those institutions. Dottor Riina never forgot that every time he spoke, he had to show he was, in every way, the boss of the Cosa Nostra, especially to those close to him. He hadn't changed. His criminal strength hadn't faded. His ability to endure, his will to command and attack his enemy. A man in jail under Article 41 bis of the prison regime has the same needs as any other, to talk and confide in someone. The investigators had a hunch and recorded his conversations when he was outside, where, obviously, he felt he could talk with more freedom. In conversations with his friends in prison, he told stories in which he was the protagonist, highlighting his criminal persona. He bragged about the explosion that killed Judge Kinichi in 1983, and about making pieces of his body fly up to the 3rd floor of the building in which he lived.
There are people who have no respect for human life and who are willing to kill for very little. These people generate fear. His strength was based solely on his scorn for human life.
Signor Riina, io sono il Salvatore della Repubblica, il dottore Laghi, e noi siamo venuti oggi a sentirla.
The first time I saw him, he was nearly 80 years old. This man felt the need to dialogue with the state. He was hoping to get some prison benefits.
Sono vecchio, mi si manda a qualche montagna a arresto domiciliare, diatemi in considerazione delle mie sofferenze.
He was still sharp-witted, a man who could easily stand hard prison time. He was a very put-together man. He dressed well, he was immaculate, he wasn't at all shabby. Interrogating Riina was extremely emotional for me. Riina was responsible for the death of people who were really close to me. I'm referring to Giovanni Falcone, a man who held my daughter in his arms. When I looked at this man's face, dramatic images of terribly mangled corpses came to my mind. I tried to contain the emotional charge I felt inside, and I tried to be the district attorney of the Republic, who would not let himself be influenced by these events.
Al spettore che lo voglio bene, a questo punto mi permette se dico la parola bene, voglio essere anche leale con
His personality was impenetrable, that's true, because in his statements there was nothing that was, let's say, sincere. Everything he said was made up.
Non aveva niente a che vedere con Borsellino, con Falcone, che le devo dire? Io sono una povera vittima dello Stato e della vita italiana. Questo da dire.
The only time I thought I saw a moment of honesty was when he said he would never contact. He used the Sicilian word unciuto, which means the men of the Secret Service.
Se io avrebbe conosciuto a uno delle servizi segreti, non mi chiamerebbe Salvatore Riina. Perché? Ce lo spiega? Perché facesse parte a queste pentite, a queste signore, se io avessi conosciuto uno di questi o conosciuto uno di questi.
I could try and say it in Sicilian like he did. I would never be unciuto if I'd ever been the boss of the bosses or underboss of the underbosses of the Cosa Nostra, as they say.
Dovete sapere chi è Salvatore Riina. Salvatore Riina è escluso di tutti questi servizi perché non ce l'ha né nella testa né nella mente ed è fisico. Riina Salvatore è Riina Salvatore da Corleone.
I said to him, do you know that Vito Cinciamino says that you have a revolver instead of a brain? I expected him to interpret this as an insult, but instead he grinned with satisfaction and said, that's a good one, as if he'd taken it as a compliment. There was only one moment of friction during the interrogation when, for a moment, I had the feeling he was going to attack me. As if to say, why are you asking me this question? Don't you know you shouldn't ask me questions about the Cosa Nostra?
La prego se non mi fare questa domanda. Io se faccio parte a Cosa Nostra, o sono capo dei capi, o sottocapo dei sottocapi, io non sono tenuto a dirlo né a lei né a nessuno.
As a matter of fact, for the first and maybe the last time in a dialogue with the state, he acted like the head of the organization. He was a person whose appearance must not fool you. Behind this short, illiterate person, there wasn't even the slightest sign of remorse. He was a traditionalist. Riina was the emblem of Cosa Nostra orthodoxy.
Io sono un uomo che vivo per i fatti miei. Io sono Salvatore Riina da Corleone e vi faccio il carcerato.
È morto Totò Riina, il boss della mafia è deceduto alle 3:37 nel reparto detenuti del carcere di Parma, dove era in coma dopo 2 interventi chirurgici.
Riina's death was expected. I thought it would be the end of an era, a bad season for the institutions and the Italian state. Riina had his own strategy. First, to conquer the Cosa Nostra, then to attack the state. He wanted to change the Italian state from a democracy into a narco-state, a mafia state. It is something he could control with his tyranny and bestiality.
Totò Riina gave absolute importance to the Cosa Nostra. It went beyond himself. It wasn't a question of money, but of power. The Cosa Nostra didn't end with Riina. It will never end.
He was perceived, and sadly could still be perceived in the future, as someone who, without ever straying from mafia orthodoxy, acted in the Cosa Nostra's interest, and not just in his own interest. From a criminal point of view, this could lead to the risk of other mafia members emulating him and considering him a hero.
Riina will be remembered for being one of the most ferocious criminals in history, the history of any country in the Western world.